The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. When Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father, he said to the disciples, "Now I am going to him who sent me, yet none of you asks me, 'Where are you going?' But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your hearts. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. About sin, because they do not believe in me. About righteousness, because I am going to the Father, and you will see me no longer. About judgment, because the ruler of this world has been condemned." The Gospel of the Lord. As we read through the book of Acts, one thing jumps out immediately, and that is nothing really important happens in this early history of the church without prayer. We see it again and again. All the major events are preceded by prayer, and usually prayer of the community. So, for example, when Judas needs to be replaced and there needs to be a succession so that there's 12 apostles, they meet and pray before they choose Matthias. That's in chapter 1. In chapter 2, we have the upper room. The disciples are there with Mary, and they're praying fervently. Then the Holy Spirit comes, and Pentecost unfolds. That's chapter 2. In chapter 4, we have the shaking of the foundations after this prayer, and they receive boldness, the disciples, to go out and preach the gospel. In Acts chapter 6, we have the first choosing of deacons, but only after much prayer. In Acts chapter 9, the conversion of Saul. On the road to Damascus, there's prayer that preceded that. In Acts chapter 10, we have the revelation to Peter of what is clean and unclean, a very important opening of the door to the Gentiles. In Acts chapter 12, the release of Peter from prison, only because of prayer of the apostles, the disciples. On and on. And then we have today's first reading from Acts chapter 16, where Paul and Silas are thrown in prison. And they're put in the inner cell, and their feet are in stocks. There's no way they can escape. And yet, what do? They're breaking out in praise and worship. This is after they've been flogged. And God works. All of a sudden, there's a great shaking of the foundations. The gates are thrown open. Their stocks are freed. And in fact, the jailer is so amazed that he converts on the spot. His whole family is baptized because of prayer. Well, today, as you know, is the World Day of Prayer for the Church in China. And this was established by Pope Benedict XVI in 2007. On this particular day, the feast day of Our Lady, Help of Christians. It's an important day because we know what's going on in China. There's a great battle for freedom to preach the gospel, freedom of conscience. And we know quite recently the retired Bishop of Hong Kong, Cardinal Zen, was arrested, and now he's subject to trial for allegedly violating China's national security law. We're called to join our brothers and sisters in praying for the church in China. And because we know from our baptism that we are given this dignity of being co-mediators with Christ, so that what happened in the Acts of the Apostles will happen today. We have major events going on in the world that need our prayers. We are co-mediators, and we're co-redeemers. So we can offer our prayers and our sufferings for the sufferings of others and the church that is in persecution, and for those who don't know God. And God will hear our prayer. Finally, we just remember what St. James said in his letter in chapter 5, the prayers of a righteous person are powerful in their effects. So we're called to recognize our dignity and pray. God will use our prayers, and they're certainly needed today. So may God bless you as we continue to pray for what happened in the book of Acts to happen today. Conversions, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, freedom. And of course, for our family of parishes, that we would come together and be a real force for good in the city of Sarnia.